I'm Mrs. Allen, and I'm really glad you're here today because we have 300 years of Westborough history. And each room here is 100 years worth of artifacts. And we start in the 1700s room, and this is the 1700s room. And why do you think we start in 1700? Anybody have an idea?
Because that's the oldest.
Yeah. Do you know when Westborough's birthday is?
1770.
Great. 1717. November 18, 1717. So it makes sense that we have collected things from the 1700s when Westborough began, and they would be in this room. Now, people came from Marlborough over to Lake Chauncey. Do you know where Lake Chauncey is?
Yes.
You play soccer near Lake Chauncey. Well, people wanted to settle near water, so we had 27 families. Well, was life easy?
No.
Why? What did people do?
They have to go all the way to. They have to walk a lot of way to get to the church. Miles.
That's right. That's how you got around. You walked.
We had to walk 6 miles.
6 miles to get to the church in Marlborough. That's right. And you might be lucky enough to have a horse or a wagon, but most of the time you walked all the time. So people got tired of that, and they said, we're going to build our own meeting house on Powder Hill, and it looked like this. And everybody was one religion. They were called Puritans, like Congregationalists. And religion was so important that it ruled all their lives just about. And they hired a very smart man who was best educated. He went to Harvard. He was very learned and wise and smart. And as the minister, as the first minister to give sermons in the church. Anybody remember his name?
Ebenezer Parkman.
Ebenezer Parkman. And Ebenezer Parkman was minister for 58 years, which is a long time. And this is one of his sermons that he wrote and that he used in the 1700s.
What is a sermon?
A sermon is a talk that you give at church, and it teaches you how to be good, it teaches you about the Bible, and people listen and learn from it, and the minister gives a sermon. And therefore, he would use this sermon over a couple of years, and again and again over his 58 years. And you would have your own seat that you paid for, actually, in the meeting house, so your family would sit in your pew, it was called. And people went to meeting all day Sunday. What do you think this is? Do you have any idea what this is? Do you know what this is?
Like a timer?
It's a kind of timer. Do you know what the name of it would be?
Sand timer.
It's like a sand timer or an hourglass, and you'd have sand in it. And when Ebenezer was preaching, they'd put this sand, and then when it ran out, that was 1 hour, and they'd flip it over, and they'd have another hour, and he would preach for hours and hours. And he was the best teacher in town, and he wrote in a diary. Does anybody have a diary here? A journal? He wrote every day of his life what it was like living in Westborough. And we still have that diary, and it's the best story about what it was like to live in Westborough in the 1700s. And Parkman's diary, and they put it in the computer now, so you can read it. But people learn from him. People can learn now from the computer, using the computer. Now, not only did they learn from Ebenezer Parkman in a church, but you learn from your parents at home. And what were some of the things that they would teach you at home that you would have to know to survive?
How to cook.
How to cook, right?
If you were bored, they teach you how to hunt.
How to hunt. You'd use this musket, this Brown Bess flintlock musket right over here. So you would hunt. What if you lived near water? What would you do?
Bring water from your grandma.
Right? And if you wanted to eat something, you would
Fish.
right? What about vegetables? Where would you get those?
Maybe you'd have to grow them.
You would grow them. You would have to grow everything you ate or hunt or get it yourself because there wasn't any stores to buy things from. So you had to learn how to do that. And the girls would learn how to do sewing by using a sampler. And they would sew the alphabet and learn all the letters or the numbers or sometimes a poem. And they would practice and practice and practice till they could sew perfectly. And then they were ready to make clothes. But they didn't even have the material. You couldn't buy the material. You had to make the material before you made the clothes. So this was one of the things they had. And this is called flax. And it's a kind of a grass that gets broken down on a hetzel. You see the thing with the needles over there? Well, you draw the grass through the hetzel and it would break it down so it's nice and soft like this. Then you would spin this flax on a flax wheel, which is a small wheel, until you got thread. This is what you get when you are spinning, and that's linen thread, but that has to be woven to make materials. You had to.
Isn't that like the hairiest thing, dried grass?
It's like dried grass, yeah. So therefore, there were many, many steps to make clothes, and it took a long time. So you had to only have maybe one outfit, one pair of pants and shirt, or maybe one best pair of pants and shirt and dress. But you didn't have a lot of clothes. Now, one of the things you might have here, I'm going to pass this around. What do you think? What do you think this is?
For your hair?
Not for your hair. Anybody?
Like you could hold fish with it, like in a cup?
Well, it's a good guess, but it's not for cooking. It's used in washing.
Oh, to pick up like the dishes and then you put it.
It's for washing clothes. It's a clothespin.
Oh.
It's a clothespin. But boys would learn how to whittle and how to make. Here, you can pass this around. And therefore they would make clothespins. And I used a clothespin like that, like this, when I was little. Nowadays, do you hang your clothes out? No, you don't use clothespins anymore. But in those days, there's a lot you'd have clothespins. Now, the one thing that we still have, and still use, is this. Do you know what this is? Have you seen one of these? We still use it. What do you think?
Like I saw it in this restaurant. They used it to flip the pizza over in the brick
Yeah,
oven.
right. Use it for pizza. It's called a peel, and it's used for baking. And in colonial times, they would reach into their oven, way in, and it's very hot, and they'd get out the pies and the bread and everything else that they were baking and bring it out with the peel. And it hasn't changed in 300 years. It's the same model as they had before.
I have a question.
Yeah?
Look at that over there.
The gun?
The black, the Christian and Muslim.
That's just the name of the room. That's my name. If you were growing up on a farm, you would be working from morning to night, farming and working with the animals, and you might be using this. Your mother might say, go out and get 4 pails of milk. Okay, so you use this. This is called a yoke. And you put it on like this, and it would have two pieces of rope from there, and you'd hook on the buckets on the rope here, and then you'd have your hands free. So it's like having an extra pair of hands. So you could carry 4 buckets of milk or water or whatever. It's a little heavy, and you have to be careful not to spill it. But that's what you'd be doing, so you could have extra pair of hands with a yoke. Now the boys would learn to carve. They would be carving bowls.
Like pottery? Like they would use
Now pottery was very expensive, and they would get it from England, and they didn't have very much of it because it was so expensive. So you would make your own. The boys would make, and their fathers would make their own plates and bowls. They also would make their own utensils. What is this made out of? This is sort of different. What do you think?
stone or like bark?
Well, it looks like it, but it's not. It's not wood. It's something on an animal, like an antler or a horn, right? And when you heat up horn, it becomes soft, and you can put it in a mold, and you can make a spoon or different shapes
That's
out
what I was
of it.
gonna say. It was a spoon.
And this one. And this is another one.
Like ivory they use on that?
Now this is also a horn, right? But this has a special name. This is a powder horn for gunpowder. And you'd keep your powder in here, and it'd be airtight and waterproof, and you wouldn't go out without your powder horn. Keep your powder dry in your powder horn to go along with your musket.
The museum that's kind of organized and taken care of by the Westborough Historical Society. William Sibley built this house in 1854. He and his wife Jane brought up 5 children in this house. So where you're sitting now was probably a bedroom that one of the Sibley children or 2 of the Sibley children had as their bedroom. They grew up in this house. William Sibley used wood, and he was a carpenter, and he used bricks. The bricks he got were made right in Westborough. What are bricks made from?
Anybody know like stone?
Yeah, sand and a mixture of sand and water. And there was a brick factory in Westborough in the 1800s, which is when this house was built. It was called the Gilmore Brick Factory, and here's a brick that was made from that factory. And William Sibley used bricks like this, made right in town, to build this house. This brick factory doesn't exist anymore. We don't make bricks in Westborough anymore. The place where it was is down near Ullman's Dairy on East Main Street, and now that's just a residential private property, private house.
Why didn't the brick have a hole?
You're lucky you started in that room for your tour, so you get to go in order. Some of the kids have to time travel backwards. You're getting to time travel forwards in time. You've been with Mrs. Allen and seen parts of Westborough history from the early settlement, the 1700s, the colonial days, and now we're here with Mrs. Hoffman in the time of Westborough, when Westborough is growing and changing and becoming prosperous in the 1800s. A couple things happened that helped Westborough grow and become prosperous and become kind of famous. One thing was the roadway, the pathway connecting Westborough to Boston and Albany and New York became widened and flattened. That's what Route 9 is now. It was called the Boston-Worcester Turnpike. And horses used it, riders on horses, and stagecoaches to come through Westborough. More and more people were able to come to Westborough and come through and share news and get ideas, and also come on their wagons and maybe stay and settle here and build their homes. Not everybody in the 1800s were farmers. The farming In the 1800s now, people had a little more free time. They didn't have to make and grow everything that they needed to survive. You found out from Mrs. Allen that if you were 9 years old and you lived in early Westborough, you worked on the farm all day long, or in your dad's workshop, learning how to build tools and furniture and how to repair tools that your family needed, repair things. If you were a girl, you learned how to cook, you learned how to sew, you took care of the babies and the old people. You've got a little more time now because your family isn't having to make and grow everything that you need to survive. So if you lived in Westborough in the 1800s, what did you do with that extra time during the day? You didn't have soccer teams, you didn't have TV, you didn't have computer games. What did you do?
Go to church.
You went to church on Sunday. Everybody still had to go to church. What did you do on other days of the week? You went to school. In 1800s, you went to school. Westborough was divided into 8 different districts or regions. You can see them on this map. It's very hard to see just with pencil. I should have a laser beam to show you. That's a map of Westborough in 1830. They divided the town into 8 different regions, and you would go to school when you weren't needed on the farm to plant crops or to harvest crops. You would go to the one school that was in your district or your region, with all the other kids from your area, your district, would go to that same school. Now, all those kids weren't 9 years old. So you were in school with kids younger than you, probably 6 years old, 7 years old, and kids older than you, maybe up to 13 years old, would all be in one room schoolhouse. And kids would help each other, and you'd learn your lessons, and as you got better for your lessons, after practice, you would stand up and recite your lessons, and then you would be promoted to the next challenging lessons by your one teacher. Have you heard of Fail School?
Yes.
Fail School was built in the 1900s. It's a modern school, not a one-room schoolhouse. But Annie Fales, who that school is named for, was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse. And she wore a dress. This is her dress. She had other dresses. That would be her dress, and she had her students, her class of different ages, and she taught them reading, writing, and arithmetic. So you, as a 9-year-old kid in Westborough in the 1800s, would go to school when you weren't needed on the farm, which would be winter and summer, when the crops weren't growing. What was happening around you with adults in Westborough that had leisure time, didn't have to be working to make and grow everything that they needed to survive?
Maybe they would be practicing sewing, clothes.
Yeah, and making things, kind of developing some hobbies, some interests. And one of them was Betsy Fay, who was Eli Whitney's mother, and her hobby was making what?
Straw hats.
Straw hats. And from her hobby, the straw hat fashion really blossomed, really grew, until there was the largest straw hat factory in the world located right here on East Main Street. That all happened from one lady making a straw hat in her living room. The straw hat industry grew through the 1800s of Westborough to be one of the largest straw hat factories in the world. Unfortunately, it burned to the ground in 1917, so you can't see the building anymore. But thousands of hats were made every day in the National Straw Works. Westborough had some other straw hat factories called the Westborough Straw Hat Factory was one. And in the 1800s, people came to Westborough on Route 9 that was on the stagecoach, or maybe on the train that was built through Westborough and connected Westborough with Boston and Worcester and New York. If that happened in 1834, people came on the train to Westborough to live and to work in the factories. Straw hats. Eli Whitney helped his mom with the straw hat industry by making hat pins and by making also hat molds. Similar to this. Hats had to be, they were made of straw, but they had to be shaped. They were flat, like big round, great big straw frisbees. They had to be molded and shaped. They needed a mold, and Eli Whitney made hat molds for his mom. This could have been
I
black.
have a question about that. Did Eli Whitney's mother die when the building got burned down?
Eli Whitney's mother died a lot earlier than that. He was only 12 when his mother died.
No,
He was still a young boy.
Did Eli Whitney's mother die when the building burned down?
That building came to Westborough in about 1860, and Eli Whitney's mother had died way before that. She made hats in her parlor, in her living room, all by hand. By the time that factory was built, there were machines, like sewing machines, and women worked at the machines to make a lot more hats a lot faster. But the hats still had to be molded, and there were machines to do that. What are the other things that Westborough made and sold? Shoes, boots, bicycles, sleighs. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. William Sibley was a sleigh maker. He that made this house, he made sleighs out in the back in a barn with his brother. And you might take a sleigh around to see the other families in town in the wintertime in the 1850s. You're going to get on your little cutter sleigh right now and glide out to the door here to the next room.
Industries taking place in Westborough, the straw hats and the shoes and the sleigh industry. But Westborough also had 32 dairy farms, and they were creating milk for school children in Boston. Okay, and 2,000 milk jugs like this were going on the train every day, okay, to provide milk for school children in Boston, because we have 32 dairy farms and 3 apple orchards. But the dairy industry was very big here, and the way they kept the dairy, the milk cold was we had an ice house on Lake Chauncey. Okay, in the winter the ice would be harvested from Lake Chauncey, and Mason Taft ran the ice house. It would be stored with sawdust in a little house, and then in big blocks like this, he would deliver ice both to the railroad people who were trying to keep the milk cool, and to people's homes. Does anybody know the original name for a refrigerator? It was an ice box, and it literally was a wooden box with a space for the ice on top, and then the food was stored underneath. So the iceman would literally come to your house. You would leave a note in the window for how much ice you wanted, and perhaps with a payment, and he would deliver ice to your house. And if the kids were home, they'd get a sliver of ice, and that would be fun for them. So the other exciting thing, if you were in 1900, there was no way to get around town. You really pretty much had to walk. Or maybe if you had a horse, you could ride a horse. If you had a bike, which was kind of expensive, you could ride a bike. But something exciting happened in 1901. The trolley came to Westborough. And this is like mass transit, similar to the T above ground in Boston today. And the trolley went to all the neighboring towns. It went to Northborough, Hopkinton, it went to Worcester, went to Marlborough. And the kids would ride the trolley to school, which was really fun, for 5 or 10 cents, and the conductor would let you ring the bell. So the trolley was a really fun thing. So the trolley company, being that Westborough was kind of rural and farm-like and relaxing for people from the city, the trolley company tried to figure out, how can we get people, our trolley goes all the way to Brookline, how can we get people to come out to Westborough to have fun? What can we do here? What can attract them? So they decided to create a resort. and they created a resort at Lake Chauncey. And so from 1901 to 1947, Lake Chauncey, the center of the resort was a dance pavilion. And it had a live band with dancing at least every Wednesday and Saturday, but certainly Saturday nights were very big. And there was, a live orchestra. It was 5 cents a dance. Here are the tickets. Okay, it was 5 cents a dance. And if you wanted to take a break and sit out on the porch and dance later, it was 5 cents to come back in. Lake Chauncey also had a restaurant, okay, on the property that was a popular place to eat. Let's see. It had an amphitheater, okay, which was a place where they put on plays, movies, vaudeville shows. It had a boat ride around the lake. It had a boathouse where you could rent rowboats and canoes. And it had a picnic grove. So it was a really fun place that they advertised. And does anybody know what famous person came out from Boston to dance at Lake Chauncey?
Babe Ruth.
Babe Ruth, that's right. That's our claim to fame. He came out to dance at Lake Chauncey because it was the place to see and be seen. They also had things like beauty contests at Lake Chauncey. And if you wanted to swim in the lake and you were a woman, you could wear this lovely bathing suit from 1900. If you can imagine, it has bloomers or culottes for your legs and a skirt that would go over it. But yes, it was about modesty because hemlines had just gone from this length, the full length, to about in the middle of the leg after World War II. And so people still were dressed modestly, but a little bit more showing of the ankle. Lake Chauncey became so famous that they wrote a song about it. All aboard for Chauncey, and you see the crowd is on the trolley, packed in there, going to Lake Chauncey. And I'll just tell you the first part of the song. It says, "In the sweet summertime, 'tis a pleasure sublime with the girl that you have by your side, just to get on a trolley, all happy and jolly, and go to the park for a ride. Then it seems like a dream filled with peaches and cream. When she locks in your eyes, you can fancy. There's no place on earth that so fills you with mirth as the cool evening breezes of Chauncey." So Lake Chauncey actually had a song written about it. That's how popular it was. So, of course, we still enjoy it today, and we can take kayaks on it now. Also, electricity was coming into use in the early 1900s. So instead of having a coal stove, now we had electric stoves. And this electric stove had pots custom made for it so that it would heat evenly. So that was a big improvement in the lives of the people that were home cooking food, mostly women at the time. Here's some of the early labor-saving devices for the kitchen. Can anyone identify what some of these are? Any ideas? What do you think?
That is a plate, I guess.
The pie plate, yes, that's from Table Talk Pies, which still exists, but people did a lot of baking. They made a lot of pies.
Right next to the plate is like cheese shredder.
Yeah, a cheese grater, that's right, that's a grater. And next to that is actually an early mixer where I think you had to mix it yourself. Nobody knows what this is. This is a toaster. That's an early toaster, believe it or not. This is an egg beater where, for mixing your milk and your eggs if you're making a cake. A masher. This for lifting boiled eggs out of the pot so you didn't burn yourself. And this is a bean pot. Okay, Boston's famous for the bean pot and the baked beans. So Wagner's Bakery in town, their equivalent of fast food in 1900 was to bring your bean pot to Wagner's Bakery. They would fill it with baked beans during the day, and you'd pick it up later in the day and have baked beans for your dinner. So, and the other funny thing is people were, still starting out using wash tubs and these kind of washing boards to clean their clothes. In the 1920s, we did get washing machines, but the early ones agitated the clothes and then had a wringer where you'd have to wring through to get the clothes to dry. And so everything, either way, your clothes were always wrinkled. So ironing was a big thing that had to be done. So we have the history of the iron. Okay, the original iron was a piece of iron made probably by a blacksmith. And it has the same handle that would heat up as the iron, so you'd need a towel or a mitt or something to protect yourself. The next sophistication of the iron was it was heavier, and it was a little easier to grip and hold, but you still would need to protect your hand. But believe me, this was a real upper body workout to iron, okay? People did a lot of heavy labor. They didn't need to go to a gym. Their everyday lives were full of a lot of muscle building exercises. And then finally, as the 1900s rolled on, someone invented an iron that was still heavy, still had to be heated on a stove perhaps, but it had a removable wooden handle, so you wouldn't burn your hand. So you can kind of see the evolution of how people were slowly improving their lives. So let's see, I wanted to show you these stereoopticons. Photography was very big in the 1800s, and by 1901, this was high tech. Okay, this is basically a 3D photographic image. I'll let you guys each look through it. Those are kids. That one is kids sitting under an umbrella. And you can see, today we say like a Viewmaster, but this was high tech in 1900 to take photography to the next level and kind of make it more 3D. Okay. Yeah, it's kind of something different that we don't see today. And then I wanted to tell you about the tornado. Later on in the 1900s, in 1953, almost 66 years ago, June 9th, a tornado came through Westborough. A pretty bad one, 300-mile-per-hour winds, 32 buildings damaged. It hit where the high school is today. That was the Aronson Farm at the time. It was a cattle farm. And it destroyed the Aronson farmhouse, which is too bad. It was a big, beautiful house. And unfortunately, 3 people were killed at that property. 2 people in the family, 1 farmhand. And then it kind of made a bizarre twist on its path, and it went to where the Harvey farm is today on South Street. So Mr. Harvey, that was a dairy farm. And he was in the barn milking the cows. And he said that everything got quiet, the birds stopped singing, the sky got kind of green, and he knew something was going to happen, but he really didn't know what, and he didn't know what had happened at the high school. And the tornado came through with these 300-mile-per-hour winds. He survived. He was able to hold on to something, but his barn was largely destroyed, and then he worried about his family, because his family were in the house nearby. And when he went out to look at the house was gone. It was gone, and he worried that his family was gone. And when he ran over to his family, they were in the basement, his wife and 3 kids, and one of his sons was still holding on to the railing, the iron railing down the steps in the basement. So it was very dramatic. The town really worked together and the school kids got involved because they had to send all the cattle out of town because it was too dangerous for them to graze. There was too much debris all over. And the school kids got involved with picking up the nails and the construction debris and helping to clean up the fields so they could bring the cattle and the milk cows back to graze. And then the high school, the Forbes Municipal Building was the high school then. That became a shelter, and the town really pulled together to help everybody. So also, I mean, the town, just to let you know, in the 1900s, we had an airport where Astra Pharmaceuticals used to be on Otis Street. There was a small airport. Speedway Plaza was a real speedway. It was a race car place for midget cars. They had demolition derbies. They had rodeos.
That's what our teacher was saying. So she was living in this place, and they said like once a year they had a demolition.
Yeah, they had stock car racing, midget car racing. So it was really loud. That was there from 1947 to the 1980s. And then industry came in around 1920s. We got Bay State Abrasives, okay, and they were big employers in the town. I mean, a real heavy-duty factory that employed 1,000 people all the way through the 1960s. And they did grinding wheels, and they kind of basically created stone that would sharpen mechanical devices that were used to manufacture cars and all kinds of other things. So, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome. This is the last session here at the Sibley House, and you've learned about how Westborough changed over time from the 1700s to the 1800s to the 1900s. And in this session, you're going to learn about how one thing changed over time, lighting. And lighting is a relatively new invention. Only the last, say, 100 years or so have we had lights. It's kind of magic. What happens when your house gets dark at nighttime? What do?
You on the lights.
You turn on the lights, right? And what do? You go over and flip a switch on the wall, right? And magic, your whole house is lit up. But for thousands of years, it was very dark here. And when those early colonists came to Westborough in 1717 and made a town here in Westborough, the town was dark. There was no lights, okay? And so what did they do? How did they have light in their home? Do you know?
Maybe like candles?
They would light candles, okay? And where would they get those candles?
They would make it with wax.
They would have to make them because there were no stores in the early days, okay? So they made them out of wax. And where did they get the wax from? Do you have any ideas? They'd have to find it in nature, somewhere, because there were no stores. Where? Honey. Honeybees. Honeybees make little wax containers, honeycombs, to store their honey. So the colonists either had bees or found bees out in the wild, and they would gather up that wax and melt it down to make candles, okay? And it would be a very intensive labor thing. This is some of the beeswax that you would find that you could melt down. You guys can touch this if you want, and make wax from. And you would take a string or a wick, and it might be the job of children to weave together enough string to make a strong enough wick. The wick is in the center of all the candles. You put them over a stick or a rod, and you would dip the candles into the boiling wax and dip candles, okay? But there wasn't a lot of wax to make candles. How many candles did you think you would need for your family? How many candles would your family need?
Maybe for the whole house.
For the whole house?
20 maybe?
For the whole, how many candles? How many?
20 maybe?
20. Would that last you the whole year? Or would you have to make candles all the time? They only made candles one time of the year.
Oh.
Okay.
200?
What? Probably 200. How many days of the year are there?
365.
365. So you'd want a candle every night, wouldn't you? Because it gets dark at night, especially in the wintertime, right? It gets dark around 4 or 5 o'clock at night. So you'd need a candle to light your house. But we didn't have a lot of raw material. We didn't have a lot of beeswax. They used another product which was called tallow. And this is tallow. This is the fat from an animal. This is beef fat. They could use fat from the deer or the moose or the bear that they hunted for food. And once they had established cow herds, they would use beef fat. And you can touch it, okay? Beef fat is a fat, waxy, fat-like substance. You would boil this down, and they'd save everything that they would do when they slaughtered the animals in the fall for the food and have beef fat. And they'd boil it down and make candles out of that. And they did it in the fall because the candles would get cool, and they'd be able to do multiple. You can test it. Have you tried it? Yeah.
Yeah, I tried it.
Okay. So that's beef fat. And beef fat was another way that they would have. There was a third product that if you lived on Cape Cod, you could make candles from bayberries. Bayberries are pretty small. They're little berries, and you didn't have to have hundreds and hundreds of them to make a bayberry candle. You take all the berries off, you boil them, the waxy substance rises in the pot, and once again you would dip in and you make a bayberry candle. This one was dipped in a copper pot, which turned it green. They smelled a little bit better than those beef fat candles, okay? So you could use 3 different things to make candles: beeswax, beef fat, or bayberries to make your candles. And you'd still have to do a lot of work. In the later days, when the tinsmith came to town, you could buy a mold. And this mold allowed you to make how many candles at the same time? 6, right. You'd have the wick that would go down, be tied off, and you could pour all of your hot wax or tallow into that mold. It would stay and it would get cooled off, and the candles would be made almost automatically, and you could have time to go do other things in your home, okay? As time went on in the 1800s, we still were using candles, but the train came to town, and you could import more fancy candlesticks from, say, England or down on Cape Cod at the Sandwich Glass Factory. We still were burning candles. But people were thinking, what could we invent? What could we use that's a different way of lighting our homes? And in the mid-1800s, the Massachusetts and Rhode Island became known for the whaling industry. We had a raw material, whales, that we could take the blubber or the fat, boil it down, and make an oil. This is an early whale oil lamp. This area would be filled with whale oil. This one was known as a petticoat or skirt lamp because it has a skirt, which made it safe when you put it on the table. It wouldn't tip over. And they would burn whale oil. So it was a bright oil that they could use, but they ran out of whales after a while.
Did they use the whale oil for candles or other kinds
For oil, they used the oil. They didn't make candles out of it. They burned the raw oil. They were looking for different types of oils and different types of mixtures to burn and use for lighting. Camphene was another mixture that they used, and they put it in this type of a lamp. It had 2 wicks, but it was kind of dangerous. So if one of the flames went out, the gases would build up within the glass, and it could shatter and break or explode. Is an exploding light a good thing to have in your house? No. So they kind of think, what else can we use? They discovered petroleum, and from that they could make kerosene. Has anyone gone camping and used a kerosene lamp?
What's
Okay.
kerosene?
Kerosene is like a burning fluid. It's an oil. And so you'd put it in here, same thing, a glass container to hold it. This one had a thicker cotton wick, okay? The higher it went up, the higher the flame went. The lower the flame, so you could adjust the flame. And you want it to be safe, so you wouldn't have the flame here, and also so it wouldn't blow out at night. You could put a glass over it. This became known as a hurricane glass, or protect it from the wind. But they would get very dirty, because at night, when you blew it out, the smoke would stay in and stay on the glass. And so it was hard for them to have this day after day. It would get very dirty and wouldn't have a lot of light. So it would be the job of the children in the morning to go out and pick up all the hurricane glasses and clean them. And I couldn't do it, or an adult couldn't do it. My hands wouldn't fit. But guess what? Does your hand fit? Oh, great. So you could take a cloth in, and you'd be happy every morning to go collect the 10 of them and clean them all before breakfast and before school every day. That would be the job of the children. As your hands got too big, you might use a cleaning rod that would have cloth on it and go inside and clean that. So that was something you were always doing, always trying to keep your house lit and clean and bright. At one point we had gas fixtures that came out of the wall when the town was piped for gas, and you would have a gas light in your house, but you'd still have to light a flame in your house. Then somebody invented something that made lighting so much safer. What was it?
The light bulb.
The light bulb. Do you know who invented it?
Thomas Edison.
Thomas Edison. Do you know how many times he had to test the light bulb to make it work efficiently? Thousands of times. An inventor tries things over and over and over again till they really figure it out. This was a great invention. Okay, this is an early light bulb that was hand blown. You can see where they cut the glass off. But it's still something we use today. We're kind of moving to LED bulbs, but the early light bulb are still used in light fixtures. Okay. Westborough has another inventor. Do you know who was a famous inventor from Westborough?
Eli Whitney.
Eli Whitney. And what did he invent?
Cotton gin.
The cotton gin. That's how he's known, but he didn't make his money from cotton gin. The cotton gin invention, he made it from guns. He was a gun manufacturer, and he had contracts with the U.S. government to make military rifles. And we have an example of one of his guns from the Whitney Arms Factory that's still here in Westborough. Okay, so
The
lighting,
Whitney Arms Factory still make guns.
it's no longer in business. Okay, so that gun making has changed over the years. But at a time, he was one of the lead manufacturers of guns in America. So you've seen how lighting changed over time. I have one quick story. This is a special lamp. It's called a courting lamp. And in the olden days, when a young man wanted to court or date a young lady, he would come over to her house, and she would sit on the front porch with him. And because there was no electricity, she would take a lamp out with her, and she'd take a small courting lamp with her. And her father would fill it up with just so much oil to last for the date so that she could spend the time out on the porch. Now, if she really liked the young man, she might have a little extra oil in her apron pocket that she could add to the lamp, And so her date would last a little longer and she could stay out because she only could be on the porch as long as there was a light out there. If the light went out, the date was over and she had to go in. So this was an early lamp just for use on the front porch. Any other questions about lighting? No. So thank you so much for visiting Westborough Historical Society today. We are open usually the first Sunday of each month, and we will be open this Sunday, June 2nd, from 2 to 4. It's free and you can visit with your family. Okay? Thank you.